coming out the jacket, cause we're turning up the heat. I wanna see you clapping when you get about your seat. It's time to make it happen when we hit these streets. I'm coming in hot and I can't be beat. Watch out now. Everybody watch out. Watch out.
Welcome to episode 66. That's a great round number that is, of Agencyphonics. I'm here today with the incredible Mr. Tom Head. Over to him in a short while. First of all, just want to say the audiobook is live now for Agencynomics. It's on, Apple Books, Audible, and also a massive thank you today to Santé Group. I think the logo is in the corner. If your agency business is looking to improve the benefits to your team members, like your sort of private health cover, which is almost essential now, I think, as a value-added benefit for your team, then please speak to Santé Group. They've got a range of other benefits also around healthcare for your team. So please speak, because without them, none of this show, none of the community can really happen without the kind generosity and support that they provide us. It's all done on a not-for-profit basis, remember. So that's kind of a quick and short intro. Thank you, sponsors. Here's Tom. Tom, you were very, very kind and spoke at our big Agencyphonics event a few weeks ago, and you did the kind of keynote kickoff, which threw you in the deep end. And the subject your title was, "What the fuck is Web3?" So I want to get onto that a little bit. But before I start, I really wanted today to cover off kind of some of the really important things about owning an agency. And you are, previous agency owner, today obviously running Comparative Linguistics, which is very much a Web3 focused consultancy, right? Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Needs a rebrand, but yeah, that's it.
Fine, what we'll do for the moment. But as a former agency owner, I think you experienced firsthand, didn't you, really, the importance of having to evolve your agency moving forwards. I think when I first met you, quite a few years ago, I can say 10 years ago or so, you had very much a web development agency, and that business completely reinvented itself as kind of that service line became commoditized. So I want you to kind of just give us a little bit of a story around how you went around, evolving your agency forward, because we're going to talk about Web3, and there are a lot of aspects to that where agencies will need to evolve what they're doing forward into new service lines. So what happened? What was your personal experience around that area?
Well, it was that exactly as you described. We had a web design and development agency, and we could see looking forward that this stuff was becoming commoditized, and in part that was offshoring development, or there was better frameworks that were being used, that were better platforms that were coming out, and from a creative or at least website design perspective, it was the templates and the sort of the banks of stuff that you could use with open source technology. And so for us, we were, as we grew in confidence, and we were working, probably around the time we were working with you guys as well, right? We were on that real change. In terms of being really receptive to, the advice we were being given and looking out and what was going on out there. And our goal was to try and create something that was different and stood slightly apart from other agencies, to give us that edge, to give us that edge in a world where there's just lots of competition,
I remember back then you were quite interested in, we talked quite a lot about sort of behavioral marketing. You had a bit of almost a sort of a separate interest in this area, didn't you?
Yeah, I was like a couch psychologist, I guess. I don't know. From reading Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and understanding, like, at the very beginnings, that book sort of is like, mindset and perception and behavior into, people like Dan Pink, and a huge number of others through Carol Dweck and anything else I could get my hands on. And so I was fascinated by that, by why people did what they did. And obviously that, fits quite nicely into the content that you're building as an agency, right? You're trying to communicate with somebody, you're trying to get a response. And so, you know, it started that. It also started, I think we looked originally at personalization as it started to come out on websites. And that was almost like our catalyst in, because we saw this ability to change a journey based on what you knew about somebody or their behavior. And we were sort of fascinated by that. And so personalization, we thought, was going to be an interesting area to gain knowledge in. And that sort of led us into some partnerships, one of them being Sitecore at the time.
Yep.
And that combination, clients were really interested. Clients were really interested in the personalization aspect, not always using it to its full capability, but from that, you know, initial conversation, they were really attracted to it. They were really interested in it. And we rode that wave with Sitecore in terms of the partnership, and we're one of their sort of smaller, but, you know, poster boy partners, basically, or poster child partners. And that did a lot for us. That got us into new clients, got us into much bigger clients, got us pushing new things in terms of websites that we were able to do. And that sort of started the journey then into much more behavioral stuff, basically, and where we ended up
into behavioral marketing, and you started to understand kind of what I would call the white label kind of sort of nudges and things that you could do to positively influence people's decision-making process and engagement.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we ended up with sort of a suite of some sense like softer tools that were built around psychology, around motivation and nudge theory that we could apply to creative, or we could use as creative tools to come up with ideas or to come up with different variations of content. And they were really, really good. And we built those out. We sort of built our own IP around those. And they worked really well for clients. But we found also that clients wanted quant stuff as well. So they wanted to almost be able to quantify certain aspects of behavior. And so what we did was we ended up finding another partner to use called Relative Insight, actually. And they can basically analyze large amounts of unstructured language data. And we brought this into what we were doing in our other models, and it allowed us to take in, you know, social media sites, Reddit, you know, customer surveys. You could convert transcripts, or you can convert customer service calls to transcripts, and you can analyze them, and you can look at the linguistics in there, and you could pick out trends and changes, and you could dice that up. So you could say, you know, what do people in the US talk about and what language do they use compared to the UK? And we added that on to what we already had. And that mix was really, really strong, actually, because we could say, you know, statistically, American customers are much more likely to use future focused language and talk about, you know, products in a positive way. And they're also interested in these things. And then we could run our models and we could come up with new creative ideas and put that out. And the combination of the two worked really, really well.
Yeah. So what, and then, you know, what I think if I go to back in my head to about 2017, I remember doing a talk at Google in Dublin, at their HQ there, on the agency landscape. And I actually, you don't know this, but I used you guys in the presentation because I'd actually shown how, you know, there were how that world of web design had built from that started in the late 90s, had kind of evolved and was changing. And you know, and at the time, I think, you know, your front page is something like, you know, the neuromarketing agency or something along those lines. What, the behavior agency, wasn't it?
Yeah, the behavioral agency, yeah.
I remember at the time saying, you know, like there's probably only 2 or 3 agencies like this in the UK, and you'd taken a business where there were probably 1,000 web agencies, and you'd gone down to a market of maybe 1 or 2. I mean, there were very few people doing it. And I think that, you know, the reason why I wanted to talk about this today was I think that was a smart move, and I don't doubt that, you know, that again will moves on. It always does for agencies, but to do that transition, because we're talking about Web3 and agencies have got to in some ways pivot to that, and that's what we want to talk about. what were the kind of things that, the journey that you had to go on back then, really, because it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a week. It must have taken a good couple of years, I guess, for that journey to complete. But how do you get the knowledge into the team when you're all trying to run client work day to day, busy? What can you remember the kind of things that you went through to make changes to become an expert in something completely new?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like a lot of things, it starts with a vision of where you want to get to and aligning people. And so we would stand up in the company meetings and we would talk about, this trying to find this new space, trying to find a differentiator, trying to look forward in terms of what was out there. And there's always a mix. So there's always like trying to get the right place when you're looking forward, which is, I think if you go too far forward in terms of innovation, you get some interest, but it's very difficult to sell it to anybody. So you get no revenue streams and eventually people get frustrated and you can't continue investing in it, particularly as a smaller agency. So you sort of need to be in the right spot, because if you don't go far enough, it's not interesting. And so what you're trying to do is look at what's on the horizon that is relevant to us, that we're interested in, and that is sort of near enough that we think this could be really big in the next couple of years. And if we make steps in terms of moving down that road, we're going to be in a really, really good position. And look, if you pick something and it's not quite right, you're still going to learn a load. You just need to pivot at the right time. I know agencies who went pretty hard down the voice route, and look, it didn't work out, right? Because it didn't happen. But they were able to pivot away from that. They used it to get some publicity. They couldn't really sell it to clients. They couldn't generate a decent revenue stream, and they pivoted away. Okay, they didn't have everything in there. And I think that for us was like we started by just saying to the agency, look, we need to look forward. We need to be open to new things. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create, a differentiator in a really crowded marketplace. So that was the starting point. And then as we went out and looked at what was happening out there, what clients wanted, where we thought the market was going, we would come back with certain things. And in the early days, it was a bit chaotic, and it was a little bit like we would just chuck stuff in and try it. And we got better as the years went on in having, a certain number of sort of new strategic objectives or projects that we would run, and we wouldn't try and do too many. We would, we did too many a few times, and it was like, it kills the profit for a quarter, or people get overworked, or you lose track of clients or whatever else. So we were like, okay, we need to pick a few, and we need to be realistic about what we've got to invest in this, and we need to sort of, in my mind, it ended up being better, like sort of having the agency on board in terms of the direction, but a small team building out little prototypes and trying stuff. And if things work, you could expand it out into the wider teams.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is if I break down how some of the things you said there, what I see across like holistically other agencies is, I think maybe 20 years ago, everyone was quite controlling about what they delivered. They wouldn't necessarily try and offer things that they hadn't done before, and I think how the world has changed. I think it did start actually back with that story that, well, not the story, but the change that Google had made to say that Google Friday, if you remember, it was like on a Friday, we work on testing and creating new products or services. And I think the concept of that kind of struck a chord with a lot of people, because, maybe if the agency or your business could try and experiment a little bit, maybe that would give you a chance to learn a new skill set that you could offer clients. B, you might be able to add value to some of your clients done, or C, you might discover a way to improve the way your business works as a result. So I think, so that definitely is, I think, a shift generally in business, that people now will experiment to try and learn new service lines. And I think the also thing you've got to be a bit careful of is, you're right, we are demand-driven businesses, right? So agencies, we kind of need demand. So if you think it's behavioral marketing, but no one needs it, that's not a good idea, right? In a way, you've got to know that there's a demand for this and there's a lack of supply. But that is a fine line, because sometimes, sometimes you don't know if there is a market till you've got the service, then someone actually buys it, right? So I think what you said is really true. I think agencies have to almost use their existing clients to sometimes test new areas and say, so then, would you mind if we've got, we want to move into this area, would we mind doing a project for you for free or for a discount or something, to give us a case study to show that we're capable of doing this type of work? I think that helps a lot, because then you've got experience, you've got a case study, and then, hopefully that also makes your team excited too, right? Because surely they need to learn new things, because the last thing your team want to do is almost become redundant themselves, because the agency gets commoditized. They haven't progressed learning new things. They might get bored doing the same old stuff. They must have had much more interesting work to do as you had pivoted as well. And work better than just doing simple website design and build.
Completely,
right?
Yeah. And I think it's important to get that core group involved and set them or work with them, not necessarily to set them. Actually, it's a really collaborative process, but to agree on what you're trying to get to as a team, and let the individual members go and set their own goals and figure stuff out and come back, because they start owning it. And we would have little teams around marketing, development, strategy, and you would each have different objectives that you're trying to do in the next few months, and you come back and you'd look at it and you sort of put it together, and it grew from that. And then eventually, we ran that behavioral side through the agency as a whole. So I would, when I was interviewing people, I would ask them to describe our agency, and I would see whether they had got enough of a gist about what we did. That was the first sort of port of call. And then when somebody joined, to pass their probation, they had to do a presentation back to the team. Anybody could turn up to it. So sometimes there were 5 people and sometimes there were 40 people. But to pass probation, I said this on day one to people who joined, you've got to do a presentation back on the behavioral elements of lab and how you're going to apply that to your job. You can talk to anyone in the agency. You can talk to me. You can talk to anybody in the agency whenever you want. You've only got to ask, but you've got to go out, find out the information, and present back how it applies to your job. It only needs to be 10 minutes. We'll help you with the presentation as well, if you need to. And we had the most amazing presentations back, both in terms of just brilliant presentations from youngsters who came in, who just stepped up and just were you were like, wow. Yeah. And from really interesting areas that people took on, right into accounts, right? So one of the junior members in the accounts team put a whole plan on how they were going to use some of the behavioral techniques to try and reduce the payment days across invoices. And it was and I think
you sent pictures of sort of dogs in, I think, because I swear I saw an agency did that once. They were like, pay your bills quicker so we can feed our dog or something like that. It was we're using a puppy to get payments quicker. But I love that. And I think actually is there nothing better than having when you have probation, you have this kind of deadline where you always have a bit of insecurity about passing it. And therefore, if you give someone a task to do by then, they're going to probably do it really well.
Yeah. Focus is the mind, right? And I sort of got that from, I think it was Netflix. And I know their whole culture handbook has been probably quoted to death. But but what I liked in there was one element where it said, we hire people because we believe in them, basically. And when they come in, we give them projects. We give them big projects to do because it gives them a chance to shine. And I know their culture is slightly different, and it was all based around A players or whatever that means. But the thing I took from that was actually that anybody that's coming into our agency, actually to give them a chance to shine, to step up, to do something, and give them the support as well. So they're not left on their own just to do it. To give them the support was one of the best things you can start a job with, because people finished those presentations and it was like a really nice end to the 3 months, and they went on, in terms of their role, and people congratulated them, and we would have a beer afterwards. It was a really, really sort of good process that reinforced what we were about as an agency and sort of help run it through, everything that we were doing.
Yeah. And I like that a lot for a lot of reasons, especially around just, creating better autonomy in a business, like getting people to be trusted to take on tasks and, and not have to feel like subservient to people telling them what to do or instruct them what to do. But I think, actually taking that one step further, if people do this, they're able to almost then do these lunch and learns and like get everyone to share what they've learned back into the team members, right? And in a way that sort of like learning and development can happen quite intrinsically internally, right?
Yeah, definitely.
As a collection. I remember years ago, I went into AKQA and Ajaz Ahmed gave me a little tour around. And I remember as I went around being really fascinated by what seemed to be an inherent curiosity in his teams to be, looking at Mashable and TechCrunch continually. Like I was looking around the screens, observing everything. And I could see that they were just looking at what was trends, what was coming up, what was new. They knew the internet was moving fast. They wanted to be aware of, what was happening next. And I think that kind of philosophy, let's say, call it, in agencies today is vital because the business, technology is moving very quickly. And I think businesses are for the first time struggling to keep up with the technology. For years, it was the other way around, technology wasn't keeping up with businesses, but now it is quite difficult to keep up with the changes.
Yeah. And you're going to have people in your agency that are much more drawn to new things and to change, and I think, it's thinking about who is in the best place and who from a personality perspective or just naturally is best at looking at these things. And the more you can enable those people to figure out a way or give them a direction in terms of where they're going, the better you'll do. And some people will naturally just won't look forward and will be the later ones to come on board, which is normal, right? You're never going to have everybody. It's like that mix between order and chaos, isn't it? It's like you need a happy medium because too much change, leads to chaos and people can't cope, and not enough, you go stale. And so it's finding the right people in the right amount.
That's very, very interesting. I think, that is true because I think sometimes a lot of founders will thrive on, the fear of change. And so they will perform there. They'll see something, they'll see it as a threat because they're often more, outwardly hunter types. And they will be going, there's a threat here. We need to future-proof our business. We need to do these things. And of course, everyone in the team's going, whoa, hang on a minute. We're doing this and we've got it working. And so, but nevertheless, it is important to get that balance between pushing forwards and not holding back, and I think you're right. It's trying to manage that in to create a pace that's acceptable, and not unrealistic, but also make sure that it kind of people understand the importance for them of doing this. It's not just about the company; it is about future-proofing their abilities as well. This leads on then to Web3. So thank you for that. I think it's just nice for us to talk about the importance of, because I feel like as for our agency, when we started, we probably reinvented ourselves every 18 months, it felt, in the early days, because the demand wasn't really set anywhere. The landscape was changing very quickly. And I think it's settled for a bit. And I think just recently it's starting to change again a little bit. And there's lots of new areas. We've got new privacy controls, cookies have changed. And, we've got these new technologies coming out as well. Much better sophistication in technology. So let's talk a little bit about Web3. And there was that fantastic quote that you kind of kicked off with in the presentation on stage from Wonderman. Who was it?
I think it was from Wonderman. Yeah. Well, there was a survey done of, I think, over 300 business leaders, CEOs, I think it was, from around the world, UK, US, Far East. And 87% of them had said that they see Web3 as a fundamental part of the next 3 years in their business. And there were other technologies in that list as well, but Web3 obviously was up there.
And so when we talk about Web3, because I think, we've probably got people of all levels and abilities listening here today, what would you kind of categorize? Because Web3 is a bit weird, really, because in a way, it's a bit like, I guess, when we first talked about the internet, it kind of meant a lot of different things, really. Today we might just associate it with everything you access through a browser. I don't know. But Web3 really is kind of an overarching description for a few fundamental pieces of technology or sort of services. Could you kind of explain very simply and quickly what those ones are? Or is that a big question to ask?
No, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. I call it an umbrella term, Web3. Okay. And I think because the reality is it's, what is underneath it is probably likely to change over time as we work out where, you know, this is super powerful and where this doesn't work and all that sort of stuff. So I sort of think of it loosely. Yeah, it's a marketing term, you know, it's come under a bit of flack.
Some people go, I don't even remember what Web 1 and Web 2 were.
Yeah, exactly. I asked agency owners actually for the talk at Agencynomics, you know, when I played a video of Daryl describing Web 3, and I asked a couple of other agency owners, and one of them said, I didn't know there was Web 2 until there was Web 3. So I think, you know, take it with a pinch of salt, basically. But it's like, okay, well, what is it? What's Web 3? The most basic sort of way to describe it is a new iteration of the web, and it's primarily built with or using blockchain technology. That was where it started. It encompasses, when people talk about Web3, a whole load of things. What you could include in that is blockchains, and all of them, and all the different types, and the cryptocurrencies that exist on blockchains, the thousands and thousands of them that exist out there. NFTs will come under that banner as well. So non-fungible tokens, obviously, they've exploded over the past couple of years. DeFi or decentralized finance. You would have things like smart contracts that exist on blockchains, dApps that are decentralized apps, the metaverse, you know, another hotly debated topic about actually what it is. And recently, like I posted this on LinkedIn recently to see what other people thought. I said, do you think Web3 has to be built using a blockchain? Because we've had AI flood in, and obviously the last week has seen the Chat GPT tool explode. And we've got the Internet of Things or connected devices, and do you see them as Web3? And there's a lot of debate about that. But I think, I probably I wouldn't say, to me, AI and, you know, the Internet of Things or connected devices are probably under Web3 right now. I would say it's probably more stuff being built with a blockchain, but who knows in future? I think, you know, when you look forward, what we've got multiple new technologies that will probably start to overlap and together do amazing things. And if you think of blockchain as a stream, you think of artificial intelligence, you think of connected devices, and you think of extended reality. So the combination of virtual reality and augmented reality, and you take those four streams and you think, okay, the combination of these four things is probably going to fundamentally alter our world and our experiences going forward. And what is that? Maybe that's Web3 eventually. I don't know. Maybe that's Web4. But yeah, I think for now it's an umbrella term that you can sort of hold loosely. But you know, it's definitely
we have this umbrella term. Funny, I actually remember, believe it or not, writing a blog post on Web 2 in 2004, and I know what the trigger point. It was O'Reilly had discovered the shift from the early days of these, static websites to all of a sudden people leaving reviews for products, and that creating almost exponential growth of those areas like eBay and Amazon. They'd noticed that it wasn't all push anymore; it was push-pull. It was like a two-way street. Was the Web 1 was very push, and I remember writing about this, and I remember noticing that shift and actually seeing that it was very incredible, because in a way it was fundamentally almost creating more earned media for the first time rather than paid. You could do paid media then, it was very early, but people were then earning media through sort of engagement. So that was quite interesting for me to have seen that. Web3 for me feels like it's gone from the push to the push-pull to the empowerment of the user. It's almost gone the other way. So I know that there are some kind of idealistic what's probably utopian views of how that is, but ultimately in the end there are no corporations. It's for some people, there are none of the Facebooks, the Googles, the YouTubes or LinkedIns, but everyone goes back to you, and you control your privacy, and they have to ask your permission, not the other way around. It's about people can validate who you are because you have everything audited about you, and so it's almost that distributed. And I think when you think about it, like when I think about Cactus, our consultancy, when I started that business in 2010, 2011, which is 11 years ago, I said to Pete, I want to build a distributed business. I want to build something that isn't centralized. I want to build, a business where everyone works for us, works, almost united or uniquely in a different location. And we called it the collaborative economy. And actually, I think there was another agency called Us Too, a friend of Julian, who basically set a similar agency up. And it wasn't really till the pandemic, I guess, that we started to see that kind of fully distributed remote type businesses starting to kind of become more acceptable. I saw FTSE 100 companies choosing distributed businesses over, people in offices for the first time. And I think in a way, when I look at the changes that's happened, this kind of what I call networked organization structure to one that's been much more flattened out, empowered, it goes a lot alongside the side of what I see a future of Web3 being, which is a much more, do you see what I mean? It's like more co-ownership, more, again, power back to individuals, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's
summarize.
Yeah, that's such a, there's a really good description of one of the core tenets of Web3, which is well, the two big pillars, I would say, are decentralization and ownership, and that's done through technologies like blockchain and the way I see it, at least for the foreseeable future, is it provides an alternative. It's not going to be every single company is decentralized and we need everything 100% decentralized. And why is that the drive anyway? I think we get a certain sort of distance down that road, and it's probably good enough. And what we want is choice. And we're still going to have centralized companies, and we're still going to have for-profit companies, and we're still going to have companies that go into offices. I don't see it as like the drive for this right now utopian future. But what I do see it as is some amazing areas where we can definitely build better systems with this approach. Because, for example, creators or content creators of any kind, musicians, artists, comedians, companies that produce content, whatever, right? Creators of anything, building fairer systems for them, and building systems where they can generate revenue for themselves as well is a really interesting area. And actually, to me, if you take like a musician, a new Web3 musician platform would sit alongside Spotify, and Spotify would be great for reach and getting new fans, but it's quite bad for monetizing fans for most musicians. They don't get paid much money for the amount of streams they get. I think it's something like $4,000 per million streams. It's not a lot. So you got that for reach. You got that for bringing in new fans. But if you had a Web3 platform that sat alongside it, which meant you could create unique versions of your own content, unique songs, unique artwork, unique experiences, access, utility, tickets, whatever else, and you could sell that to the top 5 or 10% of your fans at a more premium price because they're already bought in and they're already there and they'll pay the money and they want things that no one else can get, then you can create a revenue stream here alongside Spotify. And to me, for the foreseeable future, that's where I see, these plays sitting. They're going to be alongside what we've got at the moment. And what will happen is, if they work and they provide a good experience, they'll rise to the top. And if they don't, people will go back to the centralized systems. It's not like, I think you've got that group of early adopters now, who will overcome the challenges to use stuff because we're bought into the philosophy of it and we're bought into what it could do and the change that can happen and everything else. But for most people, they'll use a product if it's easy to use and it delivers them value, and they'll use that as their primary sort of tool. So sure, like Bitcoin, if it's building something called the Lightning Network, and that would allow it to be a currency because it'd be super fast and it'd be easy to be used. Now, if Square, for example, set up all of its terminals at like little mini businesses so it could take Bitcoin payments easily, and I could have an app on my phone and I could tap it without having to think or do anything and pay in sats, which is a subset of a Bitcoin, and it was as easy as that, great, I'm going to use it. If I've got to set a wallet up and I've got to go onto an exchange and I've got to buy Bitcoin and I've got to move it and I've got to put it on my phone, and then I've got to work out what a sat is in comparison, and then it's probably too much for people. So So I think, it sits in parallel, but at the same time, we're moving into a place in Web3 where the products that come out have got to be easy to use. They've probably got to remove the complexity from the users of the product, and they've got to deliver some value of some sort. And we've seen that with,
And by the way, I mean, like what you described is just hysterical for me because, if I go back to me in 1992, 3, everyone today can get on the internet in about 15 seconds, right? You turn the computer on, it's there, but in 1992, 3, it would take me 6 to 7 hours to get a connection to the internet. And when I did get a connection, I had to use a DOS screen to basically often send email, and I have to type in DOS Unix commands like kick and SMTP to send things. And the first web browsers would just, most websites you went to had animated GIFs of construction men digging things, or or counters on their page because only tech that was around them. But it took between about 92, 93 and probably realistically 97, 98, a good 5-6 years for that UX. And in fact, we saw things like CompuServe and we saw AOL, and these guys came in and created sort of easy ways to get on the internet. And it wasn't really the internet. It was like a walled garden where they just made it cleverly. They, separate dial-ups that got through quicker, and they made it much easier to use, but it wasn't really the internet. It was kind of like a fake version of the internet. And so I think, and also, so I think we're very intolerant, I think, at the moment, as human beings. Like, I think, we see this new tech and we're all quick to bash. I did write about this. Everyone's sort of bashing it a lot. But I think, you were quite cynical at first when you were writing. I think it's good to be healthy cynicism, but at the same time, we have to go through a period of like this to get to where we were today. I think people need to understand what it was like in those early days. It was a lot worse than probably installing a wallet on your browser and buying crypto. I mean, I'm telling you now, when I send an email, and I'm sure most of the people here over the age of probably 48 will remember this, but if you sent an email in 1993, you had to literally have a separate piece of software. You had to take an image, you had to encode it into basically, you encode it. It would create 3 attachments. You'd be 3 emails, and when you got 3 emails in, you'd have to put them into a bit just to see an attachment. It was like that took half an hour, and so people forget what it was like.
And that was, like I said, at the event, wasn't it? When I look back through that history of the internet, it was like 69 really was the very first, the ARPANET was created, which was like the birth of the internet, basically, the west coast of the US, and then it connected into, I think, Oxford or Cambridge. That was 69. It took 20 years before the first proposal was written for the World Wide Web. So 20 years had to go past. And the stuff that had to be created in that 20 years was like, email clients had to be created. TCP/IP was proposed as the protocol. Unix was, spam got created. The amount, modems had to be built and invented. Like the amount of innovation that had to happen to get to a proposal for the World Wide Web. It wasn't until 91 the first web page was built. Then in 95, remember I played that clip of Bill Gates on Letterman. David Letterman doesn't get the internet. He's like, this is just stupid. Why would you have it? Have you not heard of the radio? Have you not heard of
now? They're going, I don't get the point of NFT. I don't get the point of the metaverse. Like, but that's what everyone said back then about, I don't get the internet. I don't get why you could use CFAX. It was a lot easier. Oracle and CFAX. If I had clients who in the early days, actually, my service was helping them to get email set up because the email was on the Oracle or the CFAX.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm not going to do a web page because everyone's on CFAX.
Exactly.
So I just think, like there's a lot of, I think we'll say it's very, understand that there's a process here of change that's happening.
Yeah.
There's going to be some things that don't work, and there's going to be some things don't have to work. That some things must fail to prove that, to learn what's needed to work as well. If that makes sense. Like
exactly,
some things to go wrong. Otherwise, we'll never learn what the improvements are.
Yeah, completely. And I think I see that quite a bit at the moment, actually, in terms of the clients that I'm working with, the conversations I'm having all around Web3 projects in some shape or form, and there are clients who are running projects now, and their main goal is learning and development. Their main goal is not ROI for the business immediately. The goal is learning and development, because you know what it's like as an agency. You read stuff, you can learn a lot of stuff. You know, my journey into Web3 was I read a lot, then I went and used it. So I set all the, wallets up. I went onto exchanges. I bought crypto. I traded crypto. I exchanged it. I bought NFTs. I joined communities, like played about with it. And that's very different from just learning about it, getting into it. Like getting into a community, being active in it, waiting for the NFTs to drop, minting an NFT and celebrating with the community. Such a different feeling from just reading about an NFT. It's like that ignites the kid in you that always collected things, this very different thing. And you're like, I get why people might collect NFTs even if they're worthless, because that's what I did as a kid. And we have that collector in us who that kid who wants to collect things. So doing it is very different. And then in the same sense, getting in and running projects is very different, because you hit different challenges and you hit different things. And so there is, quite a few conversations where the main goal of the project is learning and development of the team, because back to what you were saying, like the early people who built websites, they weren't building the greatest websites in the world, but the ones that got on and built sites and increased their knowledge, that transition point when it just seemed to happen through like, oh, you don't need a company website. You don't need a company website. Everyone's got one. Like overnight, everyone's got a company website. Same with a responsive site on a mobile. You don't need a mobile site. You don't need a mobile site. Everybody has a responsive website. It was like so, bang. And, I think they see, a lot of teams are looking at it and seeing that, okay, even if we're not building stuff which is going to change the world right now, the learning we get from it puts us in a position as things are worked out to be able to run better projects in the future, because we see a future in this technology.
What's interesting as well is I started to observe this, which was when, and this sounds a bit mental when I say it, when the internet started, the internet didn't really exist. So what that meant was, when you, in that 90s period, if you wanted to learn about the internet, you would go to the bookshop and buy a book. Like, I'm not joking. Like, I had to go and buy a book on TCP and SMTP and pop email through Unix before I could have an email client like Eudora or whatever the early ones were. And so the good thing is about now is that if it only took 5 years back then, well, it didn't. The reality is the internet really didn't take off until the infrastructure was in place, which was about 2003 when ISDN went and broadband came in. But if you look at maybe between 92 and 2005, we had very little established internet. So it was there and you could find stuff, but all the answers weren't there, at that point. Like now we can get everything on the internet, and I think that's going to be fundamentally different this time, because we've now got the internet to learn and to solve things, which we didn't all, had to wait for a book to be written last time. So I think when we've got, and I just love what you said then, I think people listening need to certainly think about this phase one here, which is you don't have to build anything or sell any services doing this stuff. Just learn about it, because we all know it's coming, and we all know in some small way one piece of this will impact your business, either your services or the people who have businesses in this technology, using this technology, whether it is a Web3 company or whether it's a company that actually is doing work in it. If you can't speak their language, they're not going to work with you, are they?
Yeah, exactly. And in addition to that, I think the big areas that are opportunities are, as I said, learning and development is one, both brand and agency side. I think brands are seeing this technology as a way to reach new customers. So we know that the adoption of cryptocurrency is higher among younger people. We know they are more likely to have wallets set up. We know they're more likely to be to try and to use new technology. So brands are looking at that and saying, look, even if what we do today isn't that different from what we've got, what it does do is it puts us in front of the next generation of customers. So there's another really interesting thread there. And then thirdly, there is, okay, hold on, this technology can do something different. This technology can actually potentially unlock things that we didn't have before. and can do something different. And so there are multiple streams that are going on right now with the way brands are thinking and how they're looking at this whole space.
And you know, I like you described. I think, by the way, anyone listening who hasn't made the steps into this area, I think that the advice Tom just gave there of, you know, set up a wallet. You know, MetaMask is one. Any others Tom you'd recommend? I mean, you can go to
Phantom is another. So Phantom will get you onto, you know, the Solana
Coinbase
blockchain.
has one. You know, most people
Coinbase
know
has one
because it's quite a, you know, well-known brand. Set a wallets up, buy some currency, and, you know, and do practice transferring it, exchanging it, and I think it's start with that. I think it's a good idea. I mean, I went and bought an NFT on OpenSea.com as a test, and it actually helped me learn something a lot, by the way, that whole process. So much so that I then ended up on Discord in like some NFT groups with a bunch of sub 24-year-olds. Yeah. And exactly what you said, that subculture reminded me weirdly of about 95, 96 it was, when we had ICQ, all the chat rooms popped up on the internet early on. And actually there was this kind of this subculture of conversations happening and language. And actually I saw that and I was like, wow, this is just reminding me, like history repeating itself a lot. But again, through doing all of that, I think I went on to win about 3 pieces of business with agencies on Web3 because I kind of got it all and I could talk about it. So again, you don't have to be doing anything necessarily. We are now, but it was just understanding that, right, with a potential customer is just going to be so important. The learning.
And I think keeping an eye, you know, the other thing is alongside that is keeping an eye on what brands are doing in the space, because a lot of what's going on right now is a really good indication of where, you know, where these bigger brands are at and what they're thinking. And it gives you a really good indication of what you might better take into your current clients. So, you know, you've got Starbucks at the moment, who is just rolling out the early stages of their new loyalty program, which is on chain and is going to be using NFTs. Mm-hmm. And the demand, the reports this week are that there's high demand for it, that you're going to be able to collect different stamps as you go around different coffee shops, that you're going to have some sort of record over as to what you've done. You're going to be able to get discounts or perks in there. I don't know what else they'll do, but they've got the basis of being able to do something much more advanced with their loyalty program. And
I mean, you know, like you're preaching the converted there, because the reason we set up Agency Coin, you know, was because we felt that, you know, we could, you know, create our own loyalty system. We believed in fundamentally the technology. We know it's early and we know there are risks, but actually, you know, it is a way for you to be able to offer value added experience exclusives to people who are loyal to your brand, who are purchasing your particular coin. So, you know, look, it does work the same way as Air Miles. You know, it's almost like, you know, having a BA coin rather than Air Miles coin. But ultimately, I think the technology will make it even more simpler to use, redeem, and build, you know, better marketing, I believe, in the end. So I love that you told me that story, because I did see that. And I you know, I actually saw someone posting, you know, at least 6 months ago, you know, this won't be long and all the brands will have their own coin. Because, you know, if I buy Diesel jeans, wouldn't it be great if that every time I buy them, I get more coin and I can then use my loyalty to their brand to get exclusive directly with them, and, you know, use my tokens to pay, which is just very smart.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, that's a good lead to keep an eye on in terms of what's going on out there, and of course what's happening. And the other areas are, you know, with brands, if you know, the metaverse, I'm not going to get into like what it is and what it isn't, but really what you see with brands doing at the moment are they're looking at ways to create experiences to reach the next generation of customers. And Roblox has been a big avenue for brands doing that. Fortnite and its Unreal Engine is probably going to be another big avenue for doing that. So, you know, it's utilizing this newer areas of technology to try and get in front of consumers or in different ways and engage them. And so, you know, keeping an eye on that is a great way to see what's happening, because you'll have parallels to your current clients that you've got already that you could go and talk to about that. look at scoping out a discovery or an MVP or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. It's cool. So, okay. So the next thing I really wanted to talk about was, so, you and I started talking before the big event, and I was getting a bit worried because I'd kind of seen history repeat itself a little bit. Back in 2009, I saw a lack of investment in when social media started to come out. In fact, by 2008, I still saw a lack of investment generally in the people through the noughties who hadn't, in big agencies, who hadn't really spent time learning about digital, learning about, digital marketing or social media or websites. And, my business was ultimately sold to a big marketing and advertising agency who'd almost completely missed digital, really. I mean, they could do simple things, but that was quite limited. So basically, I then sort of saw loads of people getting made redundant in the sort of 2000 and, maybe 9. There was a recession then, as you remember anyway. But the people who lost their jobs were actually the people who didn't really understand the new world order. It was the people who hadn't moved with the times. And I just got a bit worried that in the agencies that we're in, if we don't sort of create a bit of a drive, a demand for better training and better education, then the businesses will suffer and the new agencies coming through will do better because the new agencies are already seeing the opportunities and the existing ones are finding it hard to change. So we talked about setting up a training program for agencies, right? So don't often get to plug things on this show, but I'm going to plug it. And I've got the URL here because Abby messaged it to me. So if you go to the Cactus website, cact.us, and then go to Web3, what you'll see there is we've partnered up with Tom and Tiffany St. James, and Tiffany's been on the show as well before, talking about value selling before. And Tom and Tiffany are going to put together, or you have put together, a training course for not just obviously agency founders are probably the main people, but actually, and their leaders. Oh, there we go. Look, someone's put the link up for us in the comments. That's even cooler. Well done, whoever that was. Tell us what you're going to do, but tell us how it's going to help agencies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to do, so it's going to run over the course of a year, 4 in-person sessions, and we're going to go past just sort of what is Web3, and we're going to get much more into the details of firstly getting set up and using it, like we spoke about. Be optional, but for anybody that wants to, we will during the workshops be setting up wallets, and we'll be doing a variety of different things, including minting an NFT as well. So we're going to get involved and we're going to use the technology. We're going to look at in much more detail a cross section of key brands across industry and what they're doing with the tech and why they're doing it as well. So a little bit more detail into the why behind it. We're going to follow that throughout the year. And obviously as new stuff comes in, we're going to bring it in. And we're also going to build out as we go through the year, how to pitch a business case to a new client or an existing client. So we move from just understanding it and using it into being able to really talk to like key stakeholders about why you don't want to miss the boat and why you should be looking at this and what are the big forces that are in play here and how do we start, so that anybody who's there will have knowledge, will be up and running using stuff, and will have the tools to go to a client and actually pitch really, really confidently to go and get a project started or signed off, or to win a new client doing that.
Amazing. So that sounds perfect. And I guess the people who then attend those sessions can go back and hopefully share the information with their teams and then get everyone going on this sort of journey together, so that if they can look back, I guess, a year from March when it starts, their business should be able to transition. And let's face it, as agencies, isn't our main job to help our clients, future-proof their businesses as well? And not only ourselves. I mean, our job is to advise our clients on what's happening next and what they should be doing. And that's where the value that we bring. If we're just being subservient to what they need, then they'll always probably swap out to someone in the future who seems to be, more able to future-proof their company. So this is only going to be a positive thing for anyone who's coming on board.
Yeah, exactly. And I think these things give you, if you don't have it already, they give you a way to get a seat at the table with a client You know, we were always talking about that lab, which was, you know, when we started out with a client or when we had a client, we were trying to get higher up. And when we got to, like, we would call it a seat at the table, but it was like when you got to the CMO or the person who was actually making the decisions, and you could sit with them and you could actually start to sort of almost co-write the direction, you were in a much more secure place. And I think, you know, being...
Well, that's interesting, because what goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is there are some people in the business who are looking at the future and there's some people looking at the now. And the problem is the budget holders sometimes are in the now. Sometimes there's pressure on them from, you know, higher up the organization to show them other few things that they could do to future-proof the business. But if you go in at a higher level, then they're more likely to take the investment funds and you know, show, yeah, that's what they're looking for, looking to future-proof their organization. So if you've got the confidence to go and have those conversations at that level, then in your sector, your service line, your space, then you're more likely to be able to hopefully pick up those budgets, you know?
Yeah. And I know, like, I mean, I can't say who it is, but, you know, I'm working with somebody right now, a brand everybody would know and recognize, really exciting brand. And they've got strategic objectives next year to deliver revenue through Web3. You know, that's on there. That is what their team has set out to do, and they're going to be measured on. And, you know, I think we'll see more of that through brands, but they need help with that bit. They can't, you know, very few teams brand side can work out what it is that they need to do at that point.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's a lot of, sometimes, you know, people attack like kind of the faddiness or the jumping on the bandwagon, the fame stuff of doing stuff in this new area. But as you rightly said before, you know, if you're seen in that space, if you're testing, you know, I don't think anyone should be, you know, claiming that what they're doing is going to change the world just yet. I mean, somebody might get lucky and it will do, but at least you're testing and trying rather than, you know, waiting for things to change and then, you know, being hit quite hard. So I think I love that. I hope everyone listening today really understands that message, because I do worry as agencies. Sometimes I see it a lot, you know, they just get comfortable, sit in the zone, and then, you know, kind of, you don't really see the wood through the trees. They kind of don't realize that the world around them is changing because they're stuck in the now. But if I think everyone could wake up to this, I think there'll be a lot more exciting future for most agencies, for sure. Agree?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So, So look, I think we've timed that to perfection.
That's good, because my son's going to be back in a minute, and
he's going to run.
He'll join us.
A washing machine bleeping here for some random reason.
Oh, yeah. He'll headlock me when he comes in.
So. Go and turn it off. So listen, thanks so much for giving up time. I'm looking forward to hearing feedback on the course. I know when you do these courses, the cohorts, the network between the agencies also creates so much magic from personal experience of running masterminds. Tom, look, thanks for everything you've been doing to support us and helping agencies. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Spencer.
And that for episode 66, it is a wrap. 4, 3, 2, 1, and cut.